Good day everyone. Let's approach this position this time. The Vienna game is a little bit more quiet than knight f3, but it promises a long-lasting advantage. Black's most common replies are knight f6, knight c6, and bishop c5. Let's look at knight f6 first. White has three main options: f4, bishop c4, and g3. f4 is called the Vienna gambit, and it's best met with d5, because if black takes here already, then something like e5, queen e7, queen e2 could be uncomfortable for black, because he has to move the knight. So after d5, what could happen here? If white takes on e5, then knight usually takes on e4, and if white plays queen f3, which is quite common, then just knight c6 is an adequate response, because now black can meet knight takes e4 with just knight d4. But of course white can also play just knight f3, and the game is very equal. And a little bit uninteresting also, I might say. Let's look at other options for white. Bishop c4. It doesn't perhaps have so much independent value. It often transposes to the four knights game, and this position can also be reached through the bishop's opening. So just knight c6, d3, something like this. It's quite drawish. Also, just g3 offers good chances for white. Here black usually plays d5 or bishop c5, which gives better chances for white, or knight c6. d5 or c6 seem to be good for black. Also d6. And black has this pawn on e5, which could turn out to be weak. This is called the Paulsen-Mises variation. And as we can see, white is trying to attack that e-pawn, and black is probably going to have to give it up at some point. Like I said, there are many other good moves here also. Let's look at c6, d4, or also just bishop g2 are good. And it gets quite complicated out of the opening here, which usually favors black. Also, just d6 is a way to counter this Paulsen Mises variation, which is g3, and this is perhaps not so interesting variation, and it seems good for black. Until now. And we can arrive to a very interesting and tactically rich position. Okay, white can also play a3, which is not so common, but it has been reasoned that if black plays something like knight c6, then it's like an improved version of the four knights game. I mean, with opposite colors. I mean, black doesn't have the option to go for the reversed Ruy Lopez, and also in some variations or openings where this could transpose to, black doesn't have the knight b4 option available, like for example the Scotch game, if this would go to that. But at a3 is fairly unplayed. Black can also play just knight c6, which is called the Max Lange defense. And here a few interesting points I'd like to point out are the Hampe Musio gambit, which is similar to the Musio gambit in King's Indian defense. I mean, sorry, King's gambit accepted. Here, bishop c4, and just giving the knight, playing queen f3, and opting for a strong attack. If black plays something like knight e5, then queen takes on f4, and now the checkmate has to be prevented by queen f6. This is a little bit dubious, but I guess it's worth a try, at least in blitz. One other option here is d4, which is the Steinitz gambit, and here white hopes that he has enough play after queen h4, king e2. Nowadays the top players are not willing to let their king be that exposed, but like Steinitz believed that king is an attacking piece, so this seems to offer some interesting chances for white still. If white is allowed to play just knight f3 and take on f4 like many times in King's Gambit. And it can go either way. I would be a little bit scared to play this as black, but then again, I'm not Steinitz. Other second moves for white are bishop c5, but I don't think it's something that should be studied separately, because it doesn't it doesn't really complicate the position. It almost simplifies it. And one variation that every white player should be afraid of is the Frankenstein Dracula variation, which arises after bishop c4 and knight takes e4. And this can become a very complicated position. Here usually white just plays queen h5, knight retreats, protecting f7, hitting the bishop, and this is better for white, even though black got that one pawn. So also possible was knight takes b6 or queen f3. Because that knight was going to fall anyway, so perhaps it would have been wise to take a pawn for it at least. Very dynamic, interesting position. Let's look at knight takes b6. There are many ways to go about here, so there's no forced lines, so you can just use your imagination. Instead, let's look at other choices. This sacrifice isn't working because, well, if queen f3, then knight just retreats to f7, f6. If white now takes the piece back, then black can kick the knight, and it's just uncomfortable for white, even though black's king is dislodged. Here bishop c5, bishop e7, bishop e6, all are winning for black in these example games. And indeed, castling short seems risky. So also one choice is just to take the knight, but black gets the piece back immediately with d5, and white is in trouble again. If he takes the d pawn, gives the bishop, then he doesn't have any opening advantage still. But this looks playable, so it's not anything that white should be afraid of, I guess. So taking on e4 is also possible if white gives the bishop afterwards. So thanks for watching this short video about Vienna game. Bye.